Alright, hello everyone. Here we are back for another guide. And what we're going to do is talk about this second tee box now. So with the second tee box, things tend to change a little bit, but I would probably assume that from the second tee box, you're probably going to be using power 3 balls. So you won't see too much of a change in terms of where the line falls, but what might make more sense here, because you'll probably never need to use an iron case here. So, it might make a little bit more sense for me to kind of draw this potential, your woods will kind of go up towards about here with a second tee shot. So let's take a look here at kind of priority as to kind of what you'll want here. So with the sniper, we can get away with a relatively small sniper. I'm just going to put a 6. The higher that you get it, the little bit easier that it becomes, because if your wood line is typically around here, a sniper 6 is actually going to push it down a little bit more towards max. So having at least an 8 here would be ideal. However, especially for any wind that's kind of on the north half, we'll still be able to do a rough bump here. And then, winds that kind of, are pointed towards the south direction, we'll have to probably do some kind of fairway bump here. So still able to get away with that. So next best wood that you'll probably be able to use is a Guardian, and of course similarly applies. However, with even a Guardian 2, for instance, it has a relatively decent power number, but what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put Guardian 4, because I think that's where you finally get kind of a pretty good power jump, is at the Guardian 4. And similarly, kind of the same thing with Hammerhead here. It unlocks kind of at a high level, I think maybe like 169 or something, but the higher up that you have this, the easier that it's going to become. And in the event that you can't do the rough bump, you're probably going to want at least a minimum of a Hammerhead 4 here. Now, what's the one nice thing about the Cataclysm, even though, here you can see that it falls down to the 4th kind of best wood for you to use, is you can use it right out of the gate. So if you need it, it's there for you. I think it unlocks at 175. And already has an adequate amount of backspin and topspin, even at a level 1. The only thing that you kind of forfeit is ball guide and accuracy. However, that doesn't matter if you hit your perfect ball. In fact, you can still be beat by a Cat 1. So, never assume that you still got to execute, regardless of, whatever club you're playing. So let's take a look here at the basic wind guide here, and we'll talk about, there's pretty much 2 shots that I hit here. Well, maybe 3 shots. It's pretty much 3 shots that I'll play here. So we're going to look at this, and let's go to priority 1. I'll pretty much put on landing right around here and kind of bouncing this second hop into this fringe, rolling it along, and rough bumping it right in here. Very easy shot for you to, master, and somewhere around the neighborhood of, these are backspin values, right around the neighborhood of 1. Once you get, you can even use as little as 0.75 to 1. And it's not really going to change too much for me. Maybe I'll use 1 1/4 here, but I'll probably pretty much use 1 for all of these cases. And then these headwinds, that's when I'll start to scale it back. So maybe 0.5 here. And depending on how big this headwind gets, you might not even be able to do the shot. So it's possible that you can, but you might require, a very advanced wood to even be able to hit this case right here. Down here at the bottom. And chances are you can probably, use no spin and be okay from the second tee box. It would just be, definitely mastering the land zone, though, will be the hardest thing. So for this shot, let me go ahead and start to talk about the winds here. So let me put in the headwind case. Let me put in the tailwind case. And then come down here. I'll put in this side wind case. So for the headwind, what I'll typically do here for my adjustment is max plus 30. Minimum. Absolutely minimum. It's probably going to be a little bit closer to 40. To maybe even plus 50. So that's, again, where things are going to start to get a little bit tough for this shot. Because if I need to go max plus 50, for instance, how far am I going to have to extend this up? And you're going to really, a lot of times, be pushing towards max. And that's why these tailwind cases may not be possible. But, max 30 if the wind's very, very small. Very, very small. Once it gets up to, 6, 7 miles per hour, you're probably going to want to use max plus 40. If you're kind of around 10, max plus 50. And the max plus 50 case is almost going to be non-existent. You probably have to have like a Cat 7 on or something, or Guardian 8, for instance, to have the range to even be able to pull that shot off. It's a very, very low percentage chance that you'll be able to set up right there. So the headwind cases pretty much does kind of isolate your shot a little bit as to what you can do. So what I'll typically do is land about here and then just kind of roll it out like this, and I'll offset my guide. So for instance, if I have a wind that's coming in like this, at this direction for some reason, with my ball guide, I might put here, but then I'll use some side spin and I'll just kind of let the ball guide kind of show a little bit through the hole and point it to the right of the hole before using these ring adjustment values is what I'll do. I'm getting a little ahead of myself though. Let me finish off these cases. So for this case with the tailwind, we're going to do max plus 30%. Pretty much universally. That's pretty good estimate. And similarly for the side, max plus 30. And, that just goes to show you up here where I wrote, you can almost kind of cross this case out because it's almost going to be non-existent. If I'm using max plus 30 for the tail and side, there's almost no possible way that I can get a headwind that's going to, but, in the event that it's 4 miles per hour, you can probably do max plus 30, for instance, or 3 miles per hour. It could happen in pro, for instance, especially with Kingmaker ball or something on. So, but again, like I mentioned, very isolated case that you would be able to do that. And that kind of covers all those winds. So when I'm looking at shot number 2 here, as I was mentioning about this offset, is I'll pretty much offset the hole, depending upon what direction the wind is. I might put it through or I might keep it short, depending on if it's a tailwind or a head. Because after the wind affects the ball, it's going to affect the guide and the rollout. So the person that best plays that, keep it in mind, this fairway here is actually very, very hilly as well. You need to be very exacting with the way that you play these rings, and that's where these percentages, are going to really come in key, because you really got to get on that landing zone. If you set up in a spot, you really need to make sure that you're hitting relatively close to that spot. So for the tailwind case down here, you can see that we might kind of be switching, our land zone a little bit. So I'll typically maybe only do max plus 20 down in these 2 cases, because I'm landing shorter. So there's less wind effect, which is also, a little bit closer towards min club as well. So it's not, getting up there in the air as much. Still with this headwind case, I'm still going to use at least max plus 30. With the chance to be as much as max plus 40, depending on how much of a headwind that is. I do want to talk about a third shot. If I do have a Guardian club on, for instance, or, you can get away with this with a sniper sometimes too, but landing close to this fringe here is an alternate shot. And if you can crank up the backspin, you know, I'm pretty much going to write in this case, you know, pretty much across the board. We'll talk about this pretty much for tailwind cases, which were, and you might have to just cheat this landing zone a little bit closer to the bunker. But if you were to use max backspin in this one case right here, it's also a very good way to get your distance control down on certain winds. And, you know, depending upon playing your opponent too, because there's, you know, a chance that your opponent's going to make a mistake and potentially like land up in this rough over here, because this fairway is kind of really weird. So if you play the wind effect wrong, you can clip this rough. And if you're way over here, you know, this shot with a full backspin is going to be kind of your safest approach to avoid duplicating where your opponent went. So if you can do this land zone, and you're pretty much going to use these same values. So these values are kind of duplicate values for this case. You can see that they have kind of the same line, the same, you know, north, south of one another. So the ring adjustments can be the same in those cases. So, you know, that pretty much covers this hole. Oh, well, the only thing I didn't talk about was the, let me go ahead and throw in these spin cases for you guys because I forgot to do it for these shots. So for these tailwinds here, you know, I might use kind of maybe as much as maybe 4.5 to 5. This would be absolute max. Maybe in this case with this tailwind, maybe, you know, 4.25, somewhere in here. Usually with the side wind, I'll use around 4 for my backspin. These are all backspin values still. So there's no top spin case on this entire hole. And with these headwinds, that's when I'm going to start to, you know, take off. Maybe 3 would be a good for a headwind. And for this straight in the face, you're probably going to want to bump down to as low as 2.5. You're shooting down to a lower elevation, plus with the wind effect that you're going to have, it's really going to cause that ball to check up very, very fast on that green. So you'll want to keep that ball guide kind of wherever that 4, even at like 2.5, you're not going to get much rollout. So you'll still want the shot to land, you know, kind of right in front of the pin and just roll out, you know, 5 or 6 yards, not very much. So, you know, good luck with this hole, guys. Hopefully, you know, this is kind of very helpful for you. This is going to be, you know, definitely one of the more challenging holes that they set up, but it can also, you know, also be a very rewarding hole as well, especially with that bump approach. So the, you know, that's the ideal. What you want to do is kind of priority 1 is try to be able to get that rough bump. If you can't, you know, definitely keep those alternate shots in mind. Good luck, and I'll see you guys on the next one.